For decades, he was one of the most feared and influential men in Hollywood. Not the face on the posters, the invisible force behind careers, budgets, awards, and yes or no decisions that could change a life. Harvey Weinstein didn't sell himself as a celebrity. He sold himself as inevitability. This story isn't a rise and fall about fame alone. It's about power, how it accumulates, how it protects itself, and how an entire ecosystem can learn to stay quiet when silence is profitable. The central figure here is an anti-hero, someone who mastered the game of status and leverage so completely that, over time, he appeared untouchable. In Hollywood, power doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like invitations. Sometimes it looks like a closed door. Sometimes it looks like a phone call that never comes again. And when one person becomes a gatekeeper for opportunity, fear becomes a currency everyone understands. The reason this episode matters is bigger than one man. Because when the truth finally surfaced publicly, through major journalism, public allegations, and widely reported court cases, the impact wasn't limited to a single downfall. It cracked open an entire system people had suspected existed, but rarely saw illuminated. To understand the day the power broke, you first have to understand how the empire was built, and why so many people, for so long, acted as if it could never fall. You start with the machine he helped create: prestige film as a kingdom, awards season as a weapon, and influence as the real product. His companies weren't just producing movies, they were producing momentum. A project backed by him could become serious. A performance could become award-worthy. A career could become inevitable. That kind of influence attracts dependents. Agents, executives, publicists, and even artists learn the same lesson. This is a person you don't casually cross. When a single figure has the ability to open doors, the room starts adjusting itself around his preferences. And when the room adjusts long enough, it stops feeling like adjustment. It starts feeling like the natural order. Then comes the protective layer: reputation. In Hollywood, reputation is both shield and sword. It can make accusations sound like drama. It can reframe discomfort as misunderstanding. It can turn fear into a private problem instead of a public warning. And it can make people doubt their own instincts, because they don't want to be the one who misreads how things work. This is how power becomes self-sustaining, not only through money, but through the belief that resistance is pointless. The myth isn't he's a good man. The myth is he's too powerful to challenge. And as long as that myth holds, the system keeps moving: premieres, parties, deals, while the cost stays hidden behind closed doors. That hidden cost is where the fear empire lives: whispers, rumors, and the quiet knowledge shared in selective circles. In environments like this, silence isn't always forced with threats alone. It's also purchased through private settlements, non-disclosure agreements, career incentives, and the constant suggestion that speaking up will end badly. Retaliation doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. It can be subtle: fewer meetings, lost opportunities, reputations quietly questioned. When someone's livelihood depends on access, people start negotiating with their conscience. They tell themselves it's safer to look away, safer to stay vague, safer to wait for someone else to act first. And that someone else rarely appears, because the machine rewards compliance. Hollywood is a place where relationships are currency, and currency is survival. So the system doesn't need everyone to approve of the behavior. It only needs enough people to cooperate with the silence. Meanwhile, public visibility becomes camouflage. Red carpets, awards speeches, philanthropic associations, these are not just celebrations. They're armor. They create a version of reality where the powerful look respectable and the uncomfortable stories look inconvenient. Power addiction feeds on that. The feeling that rules are for other people and consequences are negotiable if you have enough influence. But silence has a weakness: it requires darkness. And eventually, darkness meets enough light that it can't hold its shape anymore. That light arrived when people started putting names, patterns, and testimonies into public view. Major journalistic investigations, most notably in 2017, triggered a rupture that could no longer be contained by private agreements or industry whisper networks. What had been handled quietly became widely discussed, widely scrutinized, and impossible to ignore. The moment allegations went public, the story stopped being Hollywood rumor. It became a cultural earthquake. Because it wasn't just one account. It was the emerging picture of a long-running system, power used behind closed doors, and a professional world that often treated survival as silence. And once the public narrative shifted, the industry's reflexes were exposed. The same structures that had protected influence began to protect themselves. Distancing statements, sudden moral clarity, fast rebranding. It was a reminder that institutions move not only by ethics, but by risk. When silence becomes riskier than accountability, the behavior of a system can change overnight. Public reaction grew into something larger than entertainment news. It connected to a global conversation about abuse, consent, workplace coercion, and why powerful people can operate for so long without consequences. It also forced a harder question. How many people knew enough to suspect and still chose not to see? The fear empire didn't collapse because it ran out of power. It collapsed because power finally faced a sustained spotlight that wouldn't look away. Then came the stage power can't fully control, courtrooms. Weinstein faced criminal prosecutions that were widely covered, with convictions becoming headline events. In 2020, he was convicted in New York. In 2022, he was convicted in California. Later, the New York conviction was overturned on appeal in 2024, while the California conviction remained in place, an outcome that underscored how complex and contested accountability can be, even after a cultural turning point. But regardless of legal timelines, the broader impact had already detonated. Careers were reevaluated. Companies and institutions rewrote policies. Public language changed. The hashtag #MeToo movement gained global force, and power behind the scenes stopped sounding like a conspiracy and started sounding like a workplace reality many recognized. And still, the story remains uncomfortable because it doesn't end neatly. Systems don't transform just because one powerful figure falls. Some people who enabled silence keep working. Some victims continue living with damage that no verdict can erase. And the public is left with an unsettling realization. We often celebrate the products of Hollywood without asking what the system demanded from the humans inside it. The fall didn't just expose an individual. It exposed the logic of an industry. Protect what sells, protect what wins awards, protect what makes money, until the truth becomes too loud to bury. The lesson of this story is the core thesis of the channel. Fame doesn't only destroy the people who fall, it can also protect the people who rule, right up until the day the truth finds enough light to bring the whole castle down. And when it does, nobody walks away untouched. Not victims, not bystanders, not accomplices, not an audience that benefited from not looking too closely. The deeper moral is this: power thrives on silence, and silence thrives on incentives. When a system rewards people for staying quiet, it creates the perfect conditions for harm to repeat. The addiction here isn't a substance. It's control, impunity, and the rush of believing consequences are for other people. Now I want your take. What keeps fear empires alive longer? Money, reputation, or the everyday career pressure that makes people look away? Write your answer in the comments. If you want more documentary-style episodes about hidden power, industry mechanisms, and the real cost behind public success, subscribe and turn on notifications. Next video. Another figure whose public respect acted like armor, until one crack turned into a collapse nobody could spin.